The email sat in my inbox, innocuous at first glance. A forwarded chain from Thomas about a rescheduled client dinner buried beneath dozens of work-related exchanges. But my eyes, trained by years of sifting through financial data for Anomalies, caught on a tiny detail: the restaurant name. It was a small, upscale Italian place downtown, tucked away on a side street. Thomas had mentioned grabbing a quick, solitary lunch there weeks ago, complaining about the parking. This dinner, supposedly with the Miller account team, was scheduled for a Tuesday. The Miller account was notoriously early to bed, early to rise. A Tuesday night dinner at Il Portico felt off. It was just a flicker of suspicion, easily dismissed. Thomas worked long hours in finance here in Pittsburgh. His firm, Sterling & Thorne, was one of the city's established players, dealing in high-stakes mergers and acquisitions. Long hours, last-minute changes, client schmoozing, it was all part of the package. Our suburban home in Mount Lebanon, with its quiet streets and good schools, felt a world away from the steel and glass towers downtown where he spent his days. My life revolved around school runs, PTA meetings, managing our household, and occasionally picking up freelance forensic accounting gigs that fit around the kids' schedules. It was a comfortable life, a quiet life, built on the foundation of Thomas's success and my steady, if less glamorous, support. We had 2 kids, 8-year-old Leo and 11-year-old Clara, who were the absolute center of my world. But that tiny detail about the restaurant gnawed at me. It was illogical, a loose thread in the tightly woven fabric of Thomas's predictable schedule. My mind, once sharp and focused on uncovering discrepancies in corporate ledgers, hadn't entirely lost its edge. It had simply been redirected for years towards grocery lists and pediatrician appointments. Now it latched onto this. That night, after Thomas had come home late, smelling faintly of expensive cologne and something else I couldn't place, and the kids were finally asleep, I sat at my laptop in the quiet hum of the kitchen. I told myself I was just being silly, paranoid. A quick check just to put my mind at ease. I accessed our shared online calendar, cross-referenced it with his email. The Miller dinner was there, Tuesday, 7 p.m., Il Portico. Okay, fine. But then, on a whim, I checked his phone's location history, synced to our family account for safety. Most days were a predictable pattern. Home, school drop-offs, mine, downtown office, home. But scrolling back, I saw it. Several Tuesdays and some Thursdays over the past few months, showing a cluster of activity near Il Portico, but not always at the restaurant itself. And often, a later stop at an address I didn't recognize, a high-end apartment building closer to the river. My hands started to tremble. This wasn't just a scheduling quirk, this was a pattern, a deliberate deviation from the known path. I felt a cold dread begin to pool in my stomach, a sensation I hadn't felt since the market crash nearly wiped out our savings years ago. It was the feeling of solid ground giving way beneath your feet. I spent the next few days in a fog, going through the motions of parenting while my mind raced. I started checking things I never would have before. Credit card statements, small, recurring charges at places near the apartment building. Text message logs, innocuous work conversations with colleagues, but one contact stood out: Marcus Thorne. Thomas's junior partner, the rising star at Sterling & Thorne, younger, charismatic, someone Thomas had often praised, sometimes with an almost paternal pride. Their texts were mostly professional, but interspersed were messages about late nights at the office, drinks after work, things that could easily be cover stories, and the timing often aligned with the location data. The pit in my stomach deepened. It wasn't just a fling. It was with Marcus, Thomas's protégé. The betrayal wasn't just marital. It felt like a perversion of a professional relationship too. It was messy, complicated, and deeply, deeply wrong. The final piece of undeniable evidence came a week later. I found a burner phone hidden in the bottom of Thomas's gym bag. It wasn't even well hidden, almost like he was getting careless. My fingers fumbled as I turned it on. No passcode. And there it was, a flood of messages, explicit, undeniable, between Thomas and Marcus. Plans for clandestine meetings, declarations of affection, complaints about their respective home lives. Pictures. My world tilted on its axis. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, not yet. It was like my body went into shock. My analytical brain, the one that could spot a fraudulent transaction from a mile away, took over. I needed to document this. Every message, every picture, every call log. I used my own phone to take pictures of the screen, scrolling through months of their secret life. My hands were steady now, fueled by a cold, hard resolve that was alien to me. This wasn't just data anymore, this was my life, my family, reduced to evidence. It took hours. The sun was starting to peek over the trees in our backyard by the time I finished. I deleted the pictures from my phone's gallery, moved them to a secure cloud storage I used for my freelance work, a place Thomas didn't know about. I put the burner phone back exactly where I found it. I felt like a ghost in my own home, moving silently through the pre-dawn light, the weight of their secret crushing me. The kids woke up soon after, needing breakfast, needing rides to school. I put on a brave face, a mask of normalcy that felt paper-thin. Inside, I was screaming. The image of their messages, their words, their pictures was burned into my mind. Thomas came down, oblivious, asking about his coffee, his tie. I looked at him, this man I had built a life with, and saw a stranger, a liar, a betrayer. And with Marcus, the golden boy? The disgust was a bitter taste in my mouth. I dropped the kids off at school, the cheerful chatter of their classmates and the bright morning sun feeling like a cruel mockery of the darkness I was carrying. I couldn't go home. I drove aimlessly for a while, ending up in a quiet park overlooking the city skyline, the towers where Thomas and Marcus worked gleaming in the distance. That's when the dam broke. I pulled over and finally I let myself fall apart. Sobs racked my body, raw and guttural. The pain was physical, a tearing sensation in my chest. Years of love, trust, shared history, reduced to ashes by a handful of texts on a hidden phone. After what felt like an eternity, the tears subsided, leaving me emotionally drained but strangely clear-headed. The raw pain was still there, a dull ache, but it was overlaid by something else, a cold, hard anger. They thought they could get away with it, living a double life, lying to my face in my home. Thomas with his air of importance and Marcus with his smooth charm. They had underestimated me. They saw me as the quiet wife, the mother in the suburbs. They forgot I used to hunt down financial fraudsters for a living. I knew how to find things people wanted to keep hidden. I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew I could trust implicitly, Chloe. My best friend since college, living across town. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm and familiar. "Hey, Elle, everything okay?" I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "Chloe, I need you. I need you now." She didn't ask questions. "On my way. Give me 20. While I waited, sitting in my car, watching the city that housed their secret, my mind started to work, not on the pain, but on the problem. What did I need to do? Protect the kids, secure my future and consequences. They needed to face consequences. Not just a messy divorce, something that would hit them where it hurt. Their careers, their reputations in that insular, reputation-driven world they inhabited. Chloe arrived, her face etched with concern when she saw me. I got out of the car and she just wrapped her arms around me, holding me tight while I trembled. "Oh, Elle, what happened?" We went to a nearby cafe, choosing a booth in the back corner for privacy. Over lukewarm coffee, I told her everything. The suspicious detail, the investigation, the burner phone, the texts, the pictures. I showed her the evidence I'd saved. Chloe listened, her eyes wide, her initial concern hardening into fury. "Those bastards," she hissed, slamming her hand on the table. "Thomas? And Marcus? I can't believe it." "I can't either," I whispered, though deep down a part of me, the part that had felt that growing distance, the lack of intimacy, the subtle shifts in Thomas, knew something was fundamentally wrong. I just hadn't imagined this. Or with Marcus. "What are you going to do?" Chloe asked, her voice softer now. "I don't know," I admitted, but even as I said it, the wheels were turning. "Yes, I do. I'm not going to just roll over. They think they can just do this and walk away?" "No, not after everything." I looked at the pictures on my phone screen, the undeniable proof of their betrayal. "I have evidence, Chloe, real evidence." "Okay," she said, her gaze steady. "So what's the plan?" "First, a lawyer," I said firmly. "A good one, someone who knows how to handle complicated divorces, someone who isn't afraid to fight." Chloe nodded. "I know just the person, Evelyn Reed. She handled my cousin's mess. Sharp as a tack, doesn't take any BS. Okay, Evelyn Reed. I'll call her today." My mind was already moving ahead. Divorce was necessary, the legal fallout, but that wasn't enough for the betrayal, the humiliation, the sheer audacity of it being Marcus. They work in finance, Chloe. Their careers are everything. Reputation is everything. Especially Marcus. Thomas talks about him constantly, the future of the firm, how he's being groomed for partner. His whole life is tied up in that. A cold, strategic thought formed in my mind. It felt detached, almost clinical, like analysing a complex financial fraud. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was about leverage, about consequences. I need to understand the firm's policies, their ethics code. What happens when a senior partner has an affair with a junior partner? Is there a power dynamic issue? A conflict of interest? Chloe looked at me, a flicker of apprehension in her eyes, but also understanding. "You're not just getting a divorce, are you?" "No," I said, my voice flat. "I'm not. Over the next few days, I moved with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. I called Evelyn Reed's office and scheduled an appointment. I started quietly gathering more information about Sterling and Thorne, their corporate structure, their key clients, their public image. I used my old research skills, digging through public records, online news articles, industry forums. I learned that Marcus Thorne was indeed on a fast track, heavily involved in several high-profile deals crucial to the firm's growth. His reputation wasn't just important, it was his currency. Any whiff of scandal, especially one involving ethical misconduct or a relationship with a senior partner's spouse, could derail everything. Attorney Reed was exactly as Chloe described. Sharp, no nonsense, with a calm, authoritative presence. I laid out the situation, showed her the evidence. She reviewed it carefully, her expression neutral. "This is compelling evidence of infidelity, Eleanor," she said, using my full name with a professional formality that I appreciated. "It will certainly be relevant in divorce proceedings, particularly regarding asset division and potentially spousal support, depending on the specifics of your financial situation." "What about his job?" I asked, cutting to the chase. "And Marcus Thorne? Can this impact them professionally?" Evelyn leaned back in her chair. "That's a separate matter from the divorce itself, although the evidence is the same. Firms like Sterling and Thorne have strict codes of conduct. An affair between partners, especially with a power differential or involving a partner's spouse, can be grounds for disciplinary action, up to and including termination. It's a significant reputational risk for the firm and a serious ethical breach for the individuals involved. However, it's not a guarantee. The firm's response will depend on their internal culture, how strictly they enforce their policies, and how much noise this makes." "I want it to make noise," I said, my voice low and steady. "I want them to face consequences at work, especially Marcus." Evelyn looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "Revenge is a powerful motivator, Eleanor, but it can be costly. You need to consider the potential fallout. How public do you want this to be? Could it impact your children? Could Thomas retaliate?" "I've thought about the kids," I said. "I want to shield them as much as possible, but I also don't want their father and him to get away with this scot-free. Thomas will retaliate anyway. He won't like losing control. He won't like being exposed." I paused. "I don't want to destroy the firm, just hold them accountable, starting with Marcus." Evelyn nodded slowly. "All right, we can explore options. There are ways to bring this to the firm's attention discreetly, or less discreetly. An anonymous tip with excerpts of the evidence could trigger an internal investigation. Or we could send a formal letter from my office outlining the situation and the evidence, demanding that they address the ethical breaches. The latter is more direct, but leaves no doubt about where it came from." "I want to be direct," I said, "but I want to control the narrative. I want Marcus to feel the pressure first. He's the one who stands to lose the most right now, with his career trajectory." We discussed strategy. Evelyn advised me on securing our finances, opening my own bank accounts, gathering documentation for the divorce. She would draft a letter to Sterling and Thorne's ethics committee, referencing the affair and the evidence, highlighting the potential ethical violations and conflict of interest, without explicitly naming me as the source, but making it clear the information was credible and verifiable. She would draft a letter to Sterling and Thorne's ethics committee, referencing the affair and the evidence, highlighting the potential ethical violations and conflict of interest, without explicitly naming me as the source, but making it clear the information was credible and Banerjee. The goal was to force the firm's hand, triggering an internal investigation into Marcus, and by extension, Thomas. Leaving Evelyn's office, I felt a strange mix of dread and exhilaration. I was stepping onto a path I never imagined, a path of conflict and exposure. But for the first time since finding that phone, I felt a sense of agency. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was a force to be reckoned with. The following week was a blur of legal paperwork, quiet conversations with Chloe, and maintaining the facade of normalcy for the kids. Thomas was still oblivious, or perhaps pretending to be, his behavior unchanged. It was agonizing, living this double life, knowing what was coming. Then, the first ripple. Chloe, who had a friend whose husband worked tangentially with Sterling and Thorne, heard a whisper. There were rumors circulating internally about Marcus Thorne, something about an ethical review. It was vague, unconfirmed, but it was a start. Our letter had landed. The tension in the house became palpable, though unspoken. Thomas seemed jumpier, more distracted. He took more calls behind closed doors. He started working even later, sometimes not coming home at all, claiming last-minute deals or client emergencies. I knew he was likely spending those nights at the apartment building, the place I'd seen on his location history, probably confiding in Marcus, unaware that Marcus's problems were directly linked to mine. My plan was working. The pressure was building. One evening, Thomas came home earlier than expected. He looked drawn, stressed. He poured himself a strong drink and sat in the living room, staring into space. This was my chance. "Thomas," I said, my voice calm, devoid of emotion. "We need to talk." He flinched, turning to look at me, his eyes wary. "About what?" "About this," I said, holding up my phone, displaying a screenshot of one of his more incriminating texts with Marcus. His face went pale. The carefully constructed facade crumbled. "Eleanor, what? How did you get that?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "I know, Thomas. I know about you and Marcus. I know about the calls, the texts, the apartment, everything." He stammered, tried to deny it, tried to twist it. "It's not what you think. It was just stress. We were just talking." "Talking?" I cut him off, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of steel. "Is that what you call these?" I scrolled through more screenshots, holding the phone out to him. "Is this talking, Thomas? Or is this a betrayal of me, of our family? And with Marcus? Your protégé?" He buried his face in his hands. "God, Eleanor. I messed up, I know. But please. Don't do anything crazy." "Crazy," I repeated, a humorless laugh escaping my lips. "Finding out my husband is having an affair with his junior partner, lying to me for months in our home. That's not crazy. What do you think I should do, Thomas? Just pretend it didn't happen? Welcome you both over for dinner? I'll end it," he pleaded, looking up, his eyes red-rimmed. "I swear. Just don't tell anyone, please. My career, Marcus's career, it would ruin us." "Too late," I said, my voice flat. "The firm already knows, or parts of it do. An investigation has been triggered. Your little secret is out, Thomas. At work, anyway." His eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed in fury. You did this? How could you? How could I?" I stood taller, the cold determination solidifying inside me. How could you? How could you do this to our family? To me? And you're worried about your career? About Marcus's career? After everything you've done? "You don't understand," he yelled, standing up. "This is everything I've worked for. Marcus, he's up for partner. This could destroy him. Destroy us." "Good," I said, the word hanging in the air between us. It wasn't the satisfying release I expected. It was just cold. "Actions have consequences, Thomas. You and Marcus chose your actions. Now you get the consequences." He lunged towards me, not aggressively, but in a desperate, pleading way. "Eleanor, please, we can fix this. We can figure something out." I stepped back. "There's nothing to fix, Thomas. Not for us. It's over. I've already spoken to a lawyer, Evelyn Reed. You'll be hearing from her." He stared at me, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror. He saw not his wife, but an adversary. Someone he had completely misjudged. "Evelyn Reed? You're serious?" "Deadly serious," I confirmed. "Now I want you to leave. Go stay with Marcus or find a hotel. I don't care, but you are not staying here tonight." "Not in my home." "You can't just kick me out." "Oh, I can," I said, gesturing to my phone. "I have the evidence, Thomas. I have everything. I can make this very public, very quickly. You want to fight me? See what happens to your precious firm then. See what happens to your career. See what happens to Marcus." He hesitated, looking from me to the phone in my hand, the cold, unwavering look in my eyes. He knew I wasn't bluffing. He knew I had the capacity and now the will to follow through. The man who was so powerful in his downtown office was powerless here, in his own living room, exposed and cornered. With a defeated slump, he grabbed his keys and wallet from the table. He didn't say another word, just walked out the front door and got into his car, driving away into the night. I watched the taillights disappear down the street, the silence of the house rushing in to fill the void he left. It should have felt like victory. It felt like emptiness, but also a strange, quiet strength. I had faced him. I had laid bare his secret, and I had taken the first concrete step on my path. Chloe came over later that night, bringing wine and her steady presence. I recounted the confrontation, the look on Thomas's face. It wasn't satisfying like I thought it would be, I admitted. It's not about satisfaction, Elle, Chloe said gently. It's about survival and justice. You're doing what you need to do. I guess, I sighed. I don't know this person I've become, this cold, calculating person. You're not cold, she corrected. You're protecting yourself. You're protecting your kids. You're using the skills you have to navigate an impossible situation. That's strength, Eleanor, not coldness. Her words resonated. Maybe she was right. My forensic skills, once used to uncover financial misdeeds, were now being used to uncover a different kind of fraud, a personal one. And just like in my old job, the goal wasn't revenge. It was bringing the truth to light and ensuring accountability. The fallout at Sterling and Thorne was swift and, from what little information filtered back, brutal. The internal investigation, fueled by the evidence Evelyn Reed had presented, discreetly but undeniably, uncovered not only the affair, but also potential misuse of company resources or time related to their clandestine meetings. Marcus, being the junior partner, and arguably in a less secure position than Thomas, bore the brunt of it initially. Rumours solidified into facts. He was stripped of his responsibilities on key deals. His promotion prospects vanished, and within weeks he was forced to resign from the firm, citing personal reasons. The word in the industry, even in a city the size of Pittsburgh, spread fast. Marcus Thorne's promising career in finance was effectively over, at least within that competitive circle. Thomas, being a more senior partner, managed to cling on, but his position was precarious. He was sidelined, his influence diminished. The affair and the subsequent investigation had damaged his standing and reputation significantly. He was no longer the golden boy, the future of the firm. He was damaged goods. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings began in earnest. Thomas, stripped of his professional leverage and facing the quiet, implacable force that was now his wife, initially tried to fight, to minimize the settlement, to use the kids as a bargaining chip. But Evelyn Reed was a formidable advocate. We had the evidence, the knowledge of his professional vulnerability, and the clear moral high ground. Thomas quickly realized he was in a losing battle. We negotiated a settlement that secured a comfortable future for me and the children. I kept the house, received substantial spousal and child support, and a fair portion of the marital assets. Thomas, reeling from the professional fallout and the financial hit of the divorce, was a shadow of his former arrogant self. He tried occasionally to reach out, to apologize, to explain. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. The final divorce decree arrived in the mail on a crisp autumn day. I held the document in my hands, the official end to 20 years of marriage. It wasn't a moment of triumph. It was a moment of quiet finality. The conflict was legally resolved. Life began to settle into a new rhythm. The kids adjusted, surprisingly resilient, though we attended family counseling to help them process the separation. Thomas saw them regularly, supervised initially, then unsupervised once it was clear he wasn't a risk. He was polite, subdued. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. I started taking on more freelance work, eventually building up a solid client base. My skills were still sharp, and working gave me a sense of purpose beyond being a mother. I even considered going back to work full-time, a prospect that felt both daunting and exciting. One day, months after the divorce was final, Chloe and I were having coffee downtown, near the financial district. We saw Marcus Thorne walking down the street. He looked different, thinner, his shoulders slumped, the easy confidence gone. He wasn't dressed in his usual sharp suits, but something less formal, less expensive. He looked like just another face in the